Welcome, Hawks. In this video, we're going to talk about setting up Fusion 360, and we'll be kind of working our way into the gauge block. So, up on our classroom page, this video should be posted along with at least a reference for our blueprint. If you were to click on that blueprint, I have opened it up in uh, Cami, just so we can kind of see a little bit clearer. But this is an example of the summative object that you are going to be creating physically in class. You're also going to be modeling it and creating a technical drawing so you become familiar with what technical drawings look like. It's how information is shared across the world, and being able to either create them and or read them is a skill set that does take a little practice, and that's what we're going to start doing with Fusion and this particular activity. So we'll take a look here. We've got a block, and this is going to be cut from a 2x4. We're going to be doing a rough cut at 13 inches. So if I come down here and I'll say we're going to do a rough cut at 13 inches. The block will also start out at roughly 3.5 inches, but we'll actually worry about that as being 4 when we start. And the thickness here is actually going to be like 1.5 inches. Okay, but we're going to start out with it being 2. So we're going to initially start with a 2x4x13 cube, if you will, a three-dimensional cube in Fusion. So moving forward, you'll open up Fusion, and the first thing we want to do is you'll have to log in. I'm not going to show that, and you'll have created a hub or a team. That will be your hub or team. Now, you will probably not see nearly as many of these items in what they call the data panel. The data panel can be opened and closed using the waffle, okay, hide data panel or show data panel. All right. And in this location, this is kind of like your file organization. So if you think about how you organize your files on your Google Drive, this is kind of similar, but it looks different. So first thing I would suggest you do is I would suggest that you make a new project. I have already done so, and I'm calling it Building Trades, in this case 2025, 2026. This is where I want to do all my work in this project. So once I've clicked on New Project, and I've given it a name, it will allow me to basically go into that project. And the project is like a folder. Okay, so you can see it added this new project. I'm going to right click on it and delete it. I'm going to archive it. And if you mistakenly uh, maybe call it something you didn't want to, you can see I can right click and rename it. Okay. Um, and I'm going to go ahead and archive that right now. And I'm going to go to the folder that I created, uh, which I'm going to be using is Building Trades 2025, 2026. So when I double left click inside of that folder, if you will, it's called a project here. This is now where I'm going to suggest that you save all your files. And you see here I have an example gauge block. We will be talking about that in class. But before we get too far, this is where we want to save our files. So right now, we probably have a tab open in Fusion, and it says Untitled. This file currently has some things set up for it. And we want to check those. So the first thing we want to take a look at, first off, there's no name. So this is not being saved. When this says Untitled at the top, anything that we do will not be saved unless it is given a name and a location to be saved. We'll talk about that here in a second. The next item that we want to check is our document settings. And you'll see here in our browser, we've got these drop downs. The browser, we want to make sure that our units are in inches. Now, if this is your first time using Fusion, it is probably a default into millimeters. So we want to change that. Now, we can change that here on every file we start, which can get a little confusing at times, by going to Change Active Units. You'll see we get a pop-up window, and I can change this from whatever it is to, in this case, inches is what we want to set it up for. Okay. However, you might be the type of person that doesn't want to do this every time because you might forget. So what I'm going to suggest that everybody does is in the top right corner, you should see a silhouette, and that should show your profile. I'm going to left click on that. I'm going to look at preferences. Okay, so I'm going to select preferences. Excuse me. And that should open up my preferences window. Okay, so there's two things that I would like you to check. So hopefully what you see is going to match what I am showing you. The first one is all the way down on the left-hand side here. You see that there's default units. And if I click on design, default units for new design, and if this is your first time using Fusion, it's probably set for millimeters. I would like you to change it to inches. Okay, IN, inches. So go ahead and make that change. And if you did that, this apply button down here should be not grayed out. Go ahead and apply, and then that will apply that. So every new drawing I start will be defaulting in inches. Kind of standard for working with stuff in the United States until you hear differently. Okay. The other thing that I would suggest that we check, again, obviously there's a lot of stuff here, is under the General tab. This is what we saw when we opened it up. I would just like you to confirm that your default modeling orientation is with Z up, and that will become a little bit more apparent the more we work. Okay, we're going to be able to model in 3 different directions: X, Y, and Z, 3 coordinates. Okay, and we want Z up. So as long as that is Z up, and under our default units design, we have it set for inches. Go ahead and hit OK. You can hit apply before that if you did not do so, but OK should also apply it. So if and when I want to close or open a tab here, this tab was already open before I got into the folder I'm working in. Good way to make sure where you're going to save stuff goes into a folder or project where you want them is I'm just going to close this tab, and you'll see that Fusion is going to open up a new tab for me automatically. Okay, and now that new tab should be kind of like initially located here underneath this new project. Okay, we can certainly go ahead and check our document settings. You can see I have in inches. So again, that change I made under preferences has been updated. Next thing is, again, it's usually a pretty good idea to maybe not work in an untitled file. So the next thing I would suggest after you make sure you know you have the correct units for your file is we're going to go up to the File menu here at the top left. I'm going to left click on that, and I'm going to go down to Save. Okay, and this is where, again, I'm going to give you suggestions. If we're going to be working on the gauge block, I would probably change the name of the file to gauge block or whatever else it might be called. And I'm going to call this one demo. Okay, so that way I can keep it separate from the one that I already have. So again, what you call it as far as a name is kind of up to you. I would suggest that you make it something that makes sense. The next thing that is maybe worth paying attention to is the location. And you can see here that I am in Building Trades 2025-2026 project, which is what I am in my data panel, okay, in that project. So if this was not going where you wanted it to go, we can click on this arrow, and we can then select from different projects we might have access to. You probably only see like an admin project or maybe a few others, okay? So again, hopefully you have made yourself a new project. So we go to Save. You're going to give it a name. Okay, and make sure you're happy with where you are saving that file. If you don't know where your file is, I cannot help you. Okay, so we go ahead and hit save here, and you'll see as soon as I do that, it's going to change the name up at the top of our tab. And in fact, it's added a V1 on the end of that file name. You'll also notice that it has shown up here in my data panel. So again, if I happen to have my data panel closed, I won't see that. But if I open up the data panel, you can see that there is my new file, and it shows that I am currently in it, which is where this little circle T is for Thomas. Okay, so that's telling me that's the file that I'm currently in. So we talked about starting Fusion, making a project, changing our preferences, checking our units for our document, okay, and saving a file and placing it in a particular location. Now, other things that I would probably suggest that you think about is right here on this origin. So again, I'm back in this browser tab on the left, and there's an origin. Now, origin is like where things start. So right there in between the little arrow, which I can expand or contract, we have an eyeball. Okay, and it's currently grayed out. And if I click on that eyeball, you'll see all this other stuff gets turned on. So every one of these items here is showing me something on my screen. So the 0 here is this white dot. That white dot is the 0x, comma 0y, comma 0z point. Okay, so again, if you've been doing graphing at any point in time, it's kind of like home. It's where everything starts. It's our origin. Now, in addition to that, you'll see that we have an x, a y, and a z axis. And if you notice, as I'm kind of going up and down here in the project browser, you also notice that these lines, different colored lines, which are actually referring to our axes, our z axis or axis, our y axis, and our x axis. They're colored, and as I'm either hovering over the axis line in the drawing area, okay, or I kind of hover over it in our project browser, it is highlighting it in both the project browser and on the screen. Okay, so we've got our axes, and again, I can turn those off and on individually if I was so inclined. Okay, the last thing, and this is kind of where that Z up setting comes into play, is we have different planes. When we are creating our technical drawing, right, this technical drawing is two-dimensional. It does not have a third dimension. A piece of paper is flat. So as we are starting to model things, it is generally suggested that we start on our XY plane. That way, everything we model is kind of going to have an X coordinate and a Y coordinate, and the third dimension ends up being our Z. The other reason that we want to kind of use our XY plane as our starting point for sketching, okay, is that over here in the top right-hand corner, we have our view cube. And that view cube allows us to do some different things. Okay, I'm going to show you that here in a second. So let me very quickly, I'm going to start a sketch. And I can do a sketch wherever I want it. In this case, I'm going to suggest that you start on a plane. I can do this one of two ways. I can either select the plane with a left click in either the visual on my origin, or I can select it over here in my project browser. If I select that plane and then I hit create sketch, it will apply that sketch to that plane. Okay, now once it's done that, you'll notice that the cube, the view cube, has adjusted itself, and now I'm looking down from the top. Okay, we go back to our example. This is our top view. Okay, so if this is our front view, this is our top view, and that might have an impact on how I'm drawing things. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and finish the sketch. Notice when I'm in a sketch, I have a green check mark here in the top right, and I have a sketch palette toolbar window that opens up. I'm going to finish that sketch, and that's going to allow me, again, it's going to take me back to where I was in three-dimensional space, and the view cube has adjusted. And I also, down here in the bottom left corner, we have an item that's called the timeline. This is kind of recording what I do and the order in which I do it. The sketch that I just created is now shown down here. Okay, and you can see this is our time slider here. There's a sketch, and if I ever wanted to go back and access that sketch, I would just double left click on it and I would activate that sketch. Okay, one of the things that students do when they are learning the software is they'll finish a sketch and then they'll come in here and they'll do another sketch over here, and then they're gonna, oh, I don't need that one, I'm gonna get another sketch over here, and they're gonna have multiple sketches down here. When you're starting out, generally a good rule of thumb is that everything that you want to have in a preliminary sketch should be on one sketch, okay, for whatever feature or features you're creating. So if you happen to get yourself in an issue where we have multiple sketches, and sometimes people have one thing on one sketch and another, we can get rid of those by, notice I'm no longer in an active sketch. I can go down and I can right click on a sketch and I can delete it. And I can right click on a sketch and I can delete it. And I can right click on a sketch and delete it. Okay, so again, to save, I guess, your sanity and help you not run into some problems where you have multiple things on different sketches, generally suggest starting a new sketch, and this is the second way we can start a sketch. So I didn't have anything selected here. Once I click on sketch, it wants to know where you want to start this. So I'm going to select that XY plane and take us back into a sketch. Okay, now As we move through the activities, we'll be talking about things here under the Create menu. Okay. If we want to draw a line, we want to draw a rectangle, we want to draw a circle, etc., we have access to those things here. We'll also see that there is the option for dimensioning. That is located here as well. Okay. We'll see that there's a modify drop-down, and a lot of these toolbars at the top will change depending upon what I am doing, okay, and what function I might be in. So we see there's a modify toolbar here where there are some things that we can potentially use while we're sketching, and then there are these constraints. And Fusion works with constraints. They're kind of like rules or limits for what things are going to do. So between sketching and creating information, dimensioning that information, and potentially constraining information, we get to give sizes to things that we're looking to model. Okay, so as a quick practice, I would suggest maybe coming in here and I'm going to get a rectangle, and I'm going to start my rectangle on my origin point. It's always suggested to lock your sketch down by starting it on the origin point. Okay, so that origin point is going to create a constraint on our sketch. If we don't fully constrain our sketch, we can run into problems. All right, so I left clicked and I'm now dragging out a rectangle, and you'll see Fusion's giving me dimensions. You can see one of them is highlighted blue, and if I wanted to type in a particular dimension, I would just do that. Okay, and if I wanted to go to the other dimension, I can hit Tab, and you'll see that now the bottom dimension there is highlighted. And so if I wanted to give something particular size, I can type that information in. Okay, or I can simply, let's see here, draw an object. Now you see when I drew that rectangle, because I added dimensions when I drew it, the entire rectangle is locked down and it is black. So it is fully constrained. There's nothing I can do to change this unless I go into our dimension and say, hey, make it 6 or make it 15. And if I want to zoom in or zoom out, this is the scroll button on our mouse. If I want to pan, if I press and hold the scroll button, this is pan. This allows me to move things around on the screen. And then we have the view cube, where you notice I'm in a top view. I'm looking straight down at this, but if I was to click and drag on that view cube, you'll see that that sketch plane, I'm now moving it around in 3 dimensions, changing the way it looks. I can also press and hold the shift button on my keyboard and press and hold the scroll button, and that will go into the orbit function, which is kind of like using the view cube. If at any point in time you get a little disoriented, if we click on this home button, it will take us back to this home orientation. But modeling on a sketch in this orientation can be a little confusing. So I'm going to go and click on the top of the box, and that's going to take me back to that view that I was in. Okay. Now I'm going to delete this rectangle very quickly by selecting it. You see it's highlighted. I'm going to hit the delete button on my keyboard. Okay, and you can see that I can select either individual lines, or if I do some undoing here, I can left click and drag a window around an entire object and delete it all at once. So let's try a rectangle without giving it sizes. Okay, and you'll see here it looks a little bit different. Aside from it not being the 4x4, whatever it is that I started with, I have locked down the corner of my rectangle to the origin point, and 2 of my lines are black. That is a fully constrained line, and 2 of the lines are blue. What the blue tells me is that I can left click and drag on any of those 2 lines, and I can change what my sketch is doing. If I try to left click and drag on anything that is black and fully constrained, you'll notice it's not letting me move it. Okay, so again, some basic stuff with Fusion as far as sketching, some basic controls. If we want to actually lock down these 2 other objects or 2 other sides of a rectangle, we could be using constraints, or we can use dimensions. So again, under Create, we've got dimensions here. We can go down here to Dimension, or I can type on my keyboard D. Okay, and if I wanted to locate where this line's at, well, where is that line? Well, that line, if I click on an opposite line, right, I can go click on that line to another line, and you'll see that Fusion wants to apply a dimension to that. So if I left click and place that, and I can give it a size, let's say it's 5, and enter, and you can see that it changes what that sketch looks like. All right, and now we have a top line here that is also black and fully constrained. I have an additional line here that is still not fully constrained. So in this time, I'm going to just left click on a line at the bottom or the top, and you'll see that's going to, in this situation, tell Fusion that, hey, I might want to dimension where this line is located. So if I left click and place that, let's make that 20 and hit enter. You'll see now that I have a fully constrained rectangle that is 5 by 20. All right. Okay. Now, the last thing that we might want to do here is I'm going to finish my sketch. Again, remember, once I finish the sketch, it's down here in my timeline, but I can go back into it by double left clicking on it and coming in and adjusting things if I wanted to. Okay, so that sketch is always available. Now, once I finish the sketch, again, toolbars up at the top will change. I'm also going to go to the home function because now I want to, again, talk about basic information and making this three-dimensional. So in this case, we're going to be using an extrude command here under create. And you can see there's a lot of other options. Extrude is relatively common. Okay, so I'm going to click on the extrude command. And when I do that, I'm going to get a pop-up window. And if you have a successful object or sketch, Fusion will typically find it. But if I don't see this, here's his profile selected one. If I get rid of it, you'll see that that rectangle is not selected. So one of the things I have to do is tell Fusion, what do you want to extrude? Well, if I select, and I come down here to this rectangle, and I select it, you'll see that it is now blue. Right? Next things, we have some other controls of things. The next thing that might be of interest is the distance, right? So I can decide to left click and drag on this arrow, and you can see I'm going positive, or I can go down, and it's giving me negative numbers. But I'm still going to get a three-dimensional shape depending upon what I do here. Okay, so I can interact with that through an arrow. You see here I've got another slider that would potentially change what this is doing. Let's not worry about that quite yet. Or I could actually go into the distance here. Again, do the same distance on the screen, and I can say, hey, make it 2. And you can see it automatically updates that extrusion. So Fusion is a parameter-driven software where I am telling it, the parameter in this case, what to extrude and how to extrude it. All right. Last thing to pay attention to, at least at the beginning, is what we do here under operation. And typically when we're creating something brand new, we want a new body. In the future, if we do some more complex objects, we might be using the join command here or the cut command here, and it will do different things for us. So I'm going to say OK. And right now, Fusion will finish that extrusion, and we now have a three-dimensional part. Okay. If you don't like seeing the origin point, we can always turn that off at any point in time. Okay, and we'll see some other things have been added to our project browser. One where we have bodies. This is now a body. That body is, in this case, body 1. And you can see if I can turn that body on and off. I can show it or not show it. I also have a sketch here. And in this case, I only see one sketch. And I can make that sketch visible or invisible. Okay. So this one's a little harder to see because it is in fact this rectangle on the bottom of our object. Okay. And in our timeline, we now see a sketch and an extrusion. So at any point in time, I can go back and say, you know what, that extrusion, and that's actually supposed to be 2.75. Okay. Or maybe I go, it's 2 and 7/16. Okay. So I can put in a decimal or a fraction. Okay. And I can update what that extrusion did. I also can go back into the original sketch and I can go, hey, you know what? I've decided that now that distance is actually 13.875. And I update that dimension and the sketch changes. And if I was to finish the sketch, the three-dimensional extrusion will usually follow suit and adjust appropriately. Okay. So it's a little basic intro there, Hawks. I know it's kind of loud, but there's a lot to this software. There's a bit of a steep learning curve. So we're going to try to break it down into some relatively straightforward steps for you. Hope you enjoyed the video. Catch you on the next one.